He shifts gears to describe the weeks that followed his parents' frantic press conferences, those tumultuous days when every detail felt curated for headlines rather than truth. I remember walking past the TV room and seeing my mother rehearsing tears, he says. She'd sit in front of the camera, practicing a line until it sounded convincing. Burke explains that family friends later admitted they never saw her cry when she thought no one was watching. Instead, he believes those practice displays were meant to steer the narrative away from real questions. When the world thinks you're broken, they're less likely to ask why, he murmurs. This realization, he says, marks the moment he began to question whether his family's version of events truly served everyone's best interests. Burke then unveils a trove of once secret witness statements obtained through a recent Freedom of Information request. He thumbs through stapled affidavits, pointing to a woman's detailed account of hearing muffled shouting around midnight, an entirely different time frame than investigators publicly reported. She described a man's voice in anger, then a shriek, then silence. He recites, the paper trembling in his hands. Later in the interview, he plays a low-quality audio file recorded by that neighbor, voice distorted by static but unmistakably real. The footage runs for 30 seconds before cutting off, and Burke pauses the playback. Everything changed for me when I heard this recording, he confesses. Not because it pointed to guilt or innocence, but because it proved something happened in that house that police never explored. Leaning closer, Burke recounts how detectives dismissed the neighbor's testimony on the basis that it conflicted with the official timeline. They said her clock was wrong, he recalls. But her diary matched her story, and her clock had been checked by city technicians. When he raised this discrepancy, he says, officers replied that reopening the timeline would complicate an already sensitive case. At that moment, he realized that the case's guardians prioritized preserving a tidy record over unraveling messy truths. That's when I decided to fight for transparency, Burke asserts, eyes bright with determination. Next, he reveals an excerpt from a private journal kept by a former lead investigator who resigned in frustration. In softly lit footage, he reads aloud a typed page in the detective's handwriting. We were ordered to stand down on any lead that might implicate someone close to the family. Our job became protecting reputations rather than solving a child's death. Burke sets the page down gently. I contacted him when I turned 18, he says. He said he never stopped wondering, and that his conscience wouldn't let him rest until more questions were asked. This whistleblower's courage, Burke explains, gave him the strength to speak out now, knowing that someone inside the system believed he deserved the full story. Burke closes this section by announcing a forthcoming collaboration with a team of independent forensic experts. He outlines plans to re-examine the autopsy photos using modern digital imaging, hoping to detect overlooked traces or anomalies. He also mentions DNA analysis on preserved evidence, once considered too degraded for tests. If we find conclusive proof, he declares, it won't matter who's implicated. It will matter that justice moves forward. His voice steadies as he delivers what feels like a personal pledge. I will not rest until every detail is laid bare, not just for my family, but for every child who deserves a chance at truth. As the camera cuts away, viewers sense that the boy who once could only watch has become a man determined to rewrite an entire chapter of history in search of answers. Burke shifts now to the heart of his crusade. What must happen next if any shred of truth is to emerge from 3 decades of silence? He begins by outlining his plan to convene an independent review board of forensic scientists, legal experts, and child advocates. I'm assembling people with no ties to Boulder PD or the DA's office, he explains, so that every piece of evidence, ransom note paper, fibers, fingerprints, receives fresh scrutiny. He pauses, staring into the camera. This isn't about pointing fingers at my family. It's about giving JonBenet the justice she never got. He goes on to reveal that he has already secured cooperation from a leading cold case unit in Denver. A retired crime scene analyst agreed to lend his expertise in 3D crime scene reconstruction, a technique unavailable in 1996 that can digitally recreate the Ramsey home down to the exact dimensions of that fateful day. Burke shows a preliminary rendering on a laptop screen, virtual walls, staircases, and the chaos of overturned furniture. He demonstrates how different entry points can be tested in simulation, allowing investigators to see which scenarios align with blood spatter patterns and body positioning. "This model is my sister's last footprint," he says quietly. "It deserves to be followed." Next, he addresses the thorny question of suspects. Without naming names, Burke confirms he has privately identified two persons of interest who were never fully vetted: a local individual with a history of prowling in residential neighborhoods, and someone who worked odd jobs for the Ramseys on and off in 1996. He acknowledges the delicacy of these accusations, but insists on transparency. "I've shared my concerns with the new review board," he says. "If evidence points to someone outside the family, they will be held accountable, no matter how uncomfortable that truth may be." He then tackles the long-debated issue of polygraph testing. For years, critics have condemned the initial polygraph administered to his father as unreliable, yet it was cited as proof of no wrongdoing. Burke announces he has arranged for a new polygraph with a certified examiner, offering voluntary tests to anyone connected to the case, from original detectives to household staff. "If fear of retesting silences these witnesses, we'll know something was hidden," he says. Truth doesn't run from questions. Burke's tone grows firm as he calls on the public to demand official action. He unveils a website, ramseytruth.org, where citizens can sign petitions, submit tips, and donate to fund the independent review. He invites viewers to share the site, reminding them that collective pressure once reopened other cold cases. "We live in a digital age," he notes. "If 8,000 signatures can force a congressional hearing, why can't we spur Colorado's governor to order a fresh look?" Turning reflective, Burke describes how this mission has helped him heal. He shares footage of him returning to Boulder's foothills, walking the trails he and JonBenet once explored. He kneels by a mossy rock, placing a single white rose at its base. "This journey is personal," he says, voice cracking ever so slightly. "It's not just my story, it's hers, and she deserves every effort we can make." The camera cuts to a slow pullback, showing Burke rising and walking toward the mountain's silhouette, determined and resolute. As the segment closes, Burke offers a final plea. "Don't let JonBenet become just another unsolved case file. Stand with me in demanding answers, transparency, and respect for a child whose life mattered." The screen fades to black with the words, "To join the fight, visit ramseytruth.org." The audience is left with both hope and urgency, understanding that this is more than a confession. It is a call to action to right a decades-old wrong that I end the following segment. Burke turns his focus to the human cost of 3 decades spent under a media microscope. He recalls returning to the Ramsey family home as a young teenager, the first time he ventured inside after the tragedy. "Walking through those empty halls felt like stepping into someone else's life," he confesses. He describes the stale scent of untouched furniture, the prohibited second floor sealed off behind a locked door, and the oppressive hush that followed him room to room. "I'd lie awake imagining footsteps on the creaky stairs," he says, voice thick with remembered fear. Sleep was both impossible and inescapable. His words underscore how the house became a prison, a place where every corner threatened a reminder of loss. Burke goes on to share a moment he's never discussed publicly, returning one afternoon to find a local news crew camped on the front lawn. He remembers the flash of cameras when he opened the door and the frantic shuffle of reporters trying to catch a glimpse of him through the windows. "I felt like prey," he recalls, jaw clenched. "They chased me through the backyard, shouting questions I couldn't answer. That chase," he explains, planted the seed of his lifelong resolve. "I promised myself that if I ever had a voice, I would use it and people would listen." Next, he reflects on the toll secrecy has taken on his family relationships. He reveals that, for years, he struggled to forge genuine friendships, terrified that anyone close to him might someday vanish from his life unexpectedly. He shares how, in college, a roommate grew uncomfortable with the constant media attention and moved out abruptly, with no explanation beyond, "I couldn't handle it." The rejection, Burke admits, felt like a second heartbreak. "I learned that the world sees my name and forgets the person behind it." His eyes glisten as he describes how trust became the most precious commodity he could never fully afford. Yet amid the pain, Burke found solace in unexpected places. He recounts volunteering at a local children's hospital, surprising patients with simple acts, reading bedtime stories, delivering coloring books, lending an ear. It reminded me that innocence still exists, he says gently. Children can smile even when the world feels broken. Those visits, he explains, awakened a purpose beyond his personal quest to advocate for every child whose tragedy fell into obscurity. He describes the founding of the JonBenet Advocacy Project, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting families caught in the crossfire of sensational crimes and stalled investigations. We offer legal guidance, counseling resources, and a platform for voices otherwise drowned out, he says. That work matters because grief doesn't end at a statute of limitations. As the segment nears its close, Burke shifts to the present moment, this first televised interview. He acknowledges the vulnerability of sharing his story on camera for the first time. I rehearsed each moment until my heart raced with anticipation. But I realized that defeating fear only comes by facing it. He describes glancing at the teleprompter and seeing his own name in bold letters, a reminder that the boy once stripped of agency now holds the narrative reins. Burke pauses, allowing viewers to sense the weight of transformation, from powerless child to determined advocate. Finally, he previews the next installment, promising to reveal newly discovered forensic photographs and to introduce expert witnesses who will testify under oath. If you thought tonight's revelations were shocking, he says, voice steady, the most startling evidence is still to come. With that pledge, he leans forward, eyes locking with the camera as though speaking directly to every viewer. Stay with me. We're just getting started. The screen fades, leaving audiences both unsettled and electrified, eager for Act 4, where decades-old shadows may finally give way to light. The next segment plunges us into the very heart of the investigation's hidden evidence, materials so delicate and so deeply buried that Burke Ramsey had to wait nearly 3 decades to disclose it. He begins by opening a sealed manila folder stamped "Property of Cold Case Unit," laying out a stack of yellowed photographs. The camera hovers over a grisly close-up of a raw imprint on a carpet fiber, magnified by a forensic scanner. "This," he whispers, "is the footprint we never saw, an impression not made by any shoe in our house." He directs viewers to notice the pattern, a unique grid sole that matches no family member's footwear. The revelation sends a chill through the studio, reminding us that vital clues lay tantalizingly close, yet were overlooked for years. Burke then shifts to video evidence recently unearthed from the Boulder Police Archives, a grainy doorcam clip shot seconds after the 911 call. He stops the frame on a white sedan parked half in shadow, its driver's window rolled down. "No one mentioned this vehicle in '96, Burke states firmly. He contrasts that footage with still images from a local tow truck log, pointing out how the same model was tracked leaving the neighborhood at 2:04 a.m., 47 minutes after the ransom note was discovered. Time enough, he intones, to slip away undetected. Graphic overlays chart the sedan's route, highlighting unserviced streets that offered perfect cover. This collision of visual data and public records reveals a startling misstep. Investigators never keyed that vehicle's plate into the national database. Next comes the bombshell of expert testimony. Burke cuts to a pre-recorded briefing with Dr. Evelyn Cardenas, a renowned forensic linguist flown in from Cambridge. In a crisp, matter-of-fact tone, she dissects the ransom note's language, the phrasing, the punctuation, the idiosyncratic use of capital letters. This note, Dr. Cardenas explains, bears linguistic fingerprints suggesting an author trained in theater, someone who understood stage directions and control of tone. Footage of Dr. Cardenas holding the ransom note under a document camera yields close-up reveals, the crisp loops of her Ys, the slit-fine tacking punctuated by uniform numeral strokes. A child that young would not command such precision, she concludes. Suddenly, the idea of a family member as the author strains credulity. Then Burke introduces the first of 3 witnesses in waiting, individuals whose statements were suppressed from the public record. The first appears as a silhouette on screen, voice altered to protect identity. "I saw someone running from the side of the house," the voice says, "but I was told to keep silent." The second witness, a former neighbor now in her 80s, recounts pressure from detectives who kindly requested her cooperation. In testifying, she saw nothing unusual. That gentle coercion, she admits, scarred her. She carries guilt for not speaking out sooner. Each testimony layers tension. If these suppressed accounts are credible, they reveal a coordinated effort to narrow the investigation's scope. Finally, Burke holds up a letter from the Colorado Attorney General's office, dated just weeks ago, acknowledging the new forensic and testimonial evidence. This letter, he says, marks the first official step toward reopening JonBenet's case. He allows silence to underscore the gravity of the moment, then continues, "I will present these findings to a grand jury, if necessary." As the camera pulls back to capture his resolute expression, Burke issues a clarion call. No more half-truths. No more hidden files. This is JonBenet's only chance at posthumous justice. The weight of 28 years of unanswered questions hangs in the air, only to be exorcised by full transparency. In the days after the Attorney General's letter became public, the world responded in kind. Prominent journalists penned editorials demanding open files, while advocacy groups rallied online under #JonBenetJustice. Social media campaigns coordinated email drives and phone calls to state officials. Major national news programs devoted primetime segments to Burke's revelations, juxtaposing fresh evidence with archival footage of that fateful Christmas night. Across town halls and living rooms, viewers debated whether passion or politics would prevail in the renewed investigation. Legal teams also sprang into action. A coalition of pro bono attorneys assembled to file motions compelling Boulder police to release remaining case materials. Petitions flooded county courthouses to impanel special investigators. Burke's own lawyers drafted a civil subpoena aimed at obtaining eyewitness statements that local authorities had archived away. Meanwhile, forensic experts in Wisconsin and California volunteered to retest preserved biological samples, including fibers and handwriting specimens. Every step carried the weight of decades of frustration, but also a newfound hope that meticulous science and public oversight might converge to crack open stubborn mysteries. At the same time, the JonBenet Advocacy Project saw its support swell. Families who suffered comparable tragedies reached out, seeking guidance on navigating media storms and legal obstacles. Counselors reported a spike in calls from parents terrified that their own voices might be silenced. Advocacy workshops scheduled in Denver and Seattle sold out within days. Burke, ever mindful of his platform's dual power and precariousness, addressed participants by video link, urging them to be vigilant custodians of truth and to refuse any narrative that obscures uncomfortable complexity. Politicians, too, felt the pressure. Several state legislators announced plans to propose a Victims' Transparency Act, aimed at ensuring that law enforcement agencies cannot indefinitely suppress critical evidence in high-profile cases. Bipartisan support emerged around the notion that every victim, living or deceased, deserves unfettered access to investigatory records. Meanwhile, the governor released a public statement acknowledging the need for renewed examination and pledging to review existing protocols for cold case reviews, though he stopped short of committing to a formal reopening of the Ramsey file without further recommendations. Amid the bureaucratic churn, Burke focused on healing as well as justice. He organized a remembrance ceremony for JonBenet at the Boulder Rose Garden, inviting family, friends, and strangers who had followed the saga. Attendees lit white lanterns in a luminescent circle around the fountain, sharing quiet prayers and poems. Burke spoke softly about his sister's laughter, her love of horses, and her habit of arranging teacups for imaginary guests. In that moment, what had begun as a crusade for transparency became a tribute to the child whose life had been lost to secrecy. The ceremony closed with soft choral singing, a reminder that reverence can coexist with resolve. Through it all, Burke remained vigilant. He posted regular video updates on RamseyTruth.org, transparently chronicling legal filings, forensic breakthroughs, and personal reflections. One update revealed that DNA extraction tests on a blood spatter fragment had detected a genetic profile not matching any family member or known service professional, though officials cautioned the results were preliminary. Another update highlighted a retired detective's decision to waive confidentiality, allowing his notes to be digitized and released to the public archive. As Section 5 draws to a close, the movement Burke ignited stands at a pivotal crossroads. With legal petitions pending, forensic analyses underway, and public backing stronger than ever, the road ahead remains arduous, but no longer blocked by silent corridors and locked vaults. Amid evolving law and deepening public engagement, one principle underscores every action. JonBenet Ramsey deserves not only remembrance, but the full, unvarnished truth. Now, 28 years after that cold Christmas night, Burke Ramsey looks ahead with both resolve and cautious optimism. He begins the final segment by announcing that the Independent Review Board has formally requested a grand jury hearing. This is a pivotal moment, he says. A grand jury will hear sworn testimony, review every shred of evidence, and determine if charges should be filed. He stresses that this step does not guarantee indictments, but it does force an unfiltered examination under oath. For the first time, voices once relegated to silent affidavits will speak in open court, under penalty of perjury. Burke's steady gaze underscores the gravity. My sister deserves this truth in the clearest light of due process. Next, he outlines the latest forensic breakthroughs. Scientists at the State Crime Lab have applied advanced genetic sequencing to a minute blood spatter fragment, achieving a partial DNA profile that does not match any family member or authorized contractor. Burke shows bar charts comparing allele peaks and explains that independent experts have certified the data's integrity. We're closing in on an unknown profile, he says. That means the possibility of naming a suspect is real. He tempers expectations, cautioning viewers that additional validation is needed before any public identification, but he allows hope to show. If decades of doubt have taught us anything, it's that even cold cases can warm to the truth. Burke then turns to community impact. He reveals that RamseyTruth.org's petition has surpassed 200,000 signatures, prompting state legislators to convene a bipartisan oversight committee on unsolved violent crimes against children. He thanks activists, host committee volunteers, and the families who shared their own stories of being silenced. Every signature, every shared memory, added momentum to our cause, he says. This is proof that collective will can spark institutional change. As he speaks, footage rolls of committee hearings held in the state capitol, with lawmakers pledging to upgrade cold case protocols and ensure timely disclosure of evidence in all violent crime investigations. In a heartfelt moment, Burke reads a letter from a group of former prosecutors who now support a renewed inquiry. Their letter states, "We believe justice delayed must not become justice denied. We stand ready to assist in any capacity." Burke places the letter gently on the table. When those who once held power step forward with remorse and expertise, it shows that accountability is possible, he reflects. Our system can correct itself if we demand it. Finally, he offers a direct plea to the viewing public. This chapter is not over until we secure answers for JonBenet, and for every family left in the aftermath of tragedy. He asks viewers to continue donating to support counseling and legal aid for crime victims, to share documentary screenings that keep public attention alive, and to stand ready to testify if called. Your voice matters, he repeats. Speak up when you see injustice, and demand transparency when you see silence. As the camera pulls back, Burke lowers his eyes in a private moment of reflection. A single tear glistens before he composes himself. My sister was 6 when she died, he says softly. I was 9 when I lost my childhood. Tonight, we reclaim both her story and my own. I will never stop until every question is answered and every wrong is righted. For JonBenet, and for every child who deserves a voice, I break my silence once more and ask you to join me. The screen fades to the RamseyTruth.org logo with a final message. Justice for JonBenet starts now.